Everything is translated into Italian?
Yeah.
Well, that's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in this era of English dominance.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
L'hai vista in quanto?
Yeah. This is a microphone check. Yes, you can hear me. Wonderful. Good afternoon. Oh yes, I'm too close. Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 minutes past 2 o'clock. It's the third day of the Perugia Journalism Festival, and it's the first sunny day, actually. And you're all here, so that makes us happy. Keep calm and slow down is the name of the panel. My name is Gunther. I'm working for the Austrian media organization Forum Journalism and Media. And I have some wonderful panel guests around me. May I start with you? This is Lea Korsgaard. She's the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Danish digital-only magazine Zetland. The special thing about Zetland is I think you're just publishing 2 or 3 articles a day, but we're talking about this a little bit later. Welcome. To my right, to your left, is Alberto Puliafito. Yes. He's the editor of Slow News, so this is our newsletters. I think you have 2 newsletters, yes. In which you support the idea of slow news. We will talk about this later. Last but not least, the gentleman with the hat is Peter Laufer. He's a professor at the University of Oregon School of Journalism. He's a long experienced radio journalist and a book author, for example, of this book here, Slow News. Welcome. And actually, Peter and we know each other for quite a while. And when I arrived here in Perugia, I said, "Hey, Peter, we have to talk about the panel. I'll text you a message or I'll write you an email so that we can meet and talk about slow news." And he said, "No. This is slow news. Take it slow. We just meet, have a coffee, and we don't write each other an email or text a message." So does that mean everybody who's now typing in their mobile phones or in their tablets or should leave the room because this is a slow news panel?
Well, here's the deal, Gunther, and all of you. I have a challenge, okay? Sure. So give me this option. I've been watching, can I grab this and just take it? I've been watching this woman right here, and you've been for the last, what is your name?
Zuza.
Zuza here for the last 10 minutes or so has been mightily on your mobile phone. Would you give it to me, please?
I'm not sure that I will.
Well, I'll give it back to you. I will give it back to you, okay? So we'll test this, Gunther, okay?
Sure.
And Zuza, we will hold this for you, and when the panel is over, we'll give it back to you and see how you do without it for an hour, okay?
Great, Peter.
She says.
Is this your definition of slow news?
Well, this is a definition because she will be without this and will, in theory, be more present.
Okay. I have to say I'm very skeptical about the whole concept of slow news. To me, it's just another expression of doing journalism, if I understood this book right. Can you give me a definition of what slow news is to you?
Sure, but I'm going to give
mobile
this back
phones?
to
Yeah,
Susan,
please.
Because I see a little bit of
Okay, Peter is...
Yes.
busy with the mobile phones. Should I start with Lea?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I think so too. Lea, please tell us about your definition of slow news and what it means for your digital-only magazine Zetland.
Yeah.
And what are you doing with Zetland?
So at Zetland, we aim at not only telling what happens, but also why it happens and why it matters. And that takes time, you know. If that's your goal with your journalism, you can tell the story as it unfolds, I think. And we've always used, in journalism, we've always used technology to, you know, to move information from A to B as fast as technology allowed us for, right? And that was difficult once, and that was expensive one, and that was a thing worth paying money for, that someone would take a bit of information from, say, Italy to Denmark. That was worth paying for, you know, that was how you got news. But today it's not difficult to move information from A to B. Everyone does that. You know, right now probably people are doing that.
Except this fellow.
Yeah, except this fellow, yeah. So it's not difficult, it's not costly, and it's not, I would argue it's not worth paying for, right? So so if we want to in order to be meaningful and to give a meaningful content to our readers and in our case our members, I think we have to do more than just move information. We have to put into context. We have to connect the dots. We have to, tell, like I said before, not only what happens, but also why it. Try to explain why it happens. And that just takes time. You can't do that simultaneously while the event is unfolding, I guess.
So digital and slow news is not necessarily a contradiction. Because to me, digital, I'm connecting with fast news, yeah? Clickbaiting, fast news. But for you and for Zetland, this is no contradiction at all.
No, sure. I mean, I would definitely count myself into the skeptics, you know, those who think that there is an attention crisis out there and that we are in the midst of a information overload, that information is pushed in and out of our head and makes it harder and harder to actually grapple with information, right? Because because of the pace, right? But no, the technology is not in itself the enemy here. Of course, you can give slow news on a fast telephone, I guess.
True. So can you just give us some information about the business model of Zetland? How many subscribers do you have, and how does it work? Why do people embrace your slow news approach?
So recently we got our over 10,000 members, as we call our subscribers, which is quite good in Denmark. I think it makes us the fastest growing digital newspaper at least in the Nordic countries. So the business model is membership based. So our members pay for the journalism. There's no ads, and when we ask them why they're members, they more or less always point to the fact that they're tired of breaking news, that they want more substance and more context, that they want help. They want journalism to be their friend in, finding their way through this information overload. So that's why they want to pay for us.
Okay. Alberto, tell us about when you came up with the idea of slow news, and you have 2 newsletters that you send out to how many subscribers? What is the name of the newsletter, and what is the idea behind it? Can you give us some intel on that?
I have been for several years the editor-in-chief of a big digital Italian newspaper, and we were obsessed by clicks and traffic on our websites because the business model was only based on ads. So I was living with my Google Analytics always open on a screen, and it was an obsession to to get more traffic. And for me, it was simply crazy because we were forced to produce a lot of articles, from 600 to 800 articles a day. And as an editor-in-chief, I wasn't able to read them. And so I started thinking, can we have some different journalism? And I Googled slow journalism. And at first I found Peter's book, and then Rob Orchard's Delayed Gratification, which is a paper magazine about slow journalism. And I started thinking with some of my partners who are here today, okay, we can do something different. Of course, it doesn't depend on the technology. I want to steal an example from Peter. Even paper can be very fast, okay? And it doesn't depend on technology. So you can have slow journalism on mobile, you can have slow journalism on paper like delayed gratification, and we are trying with the newsletters. We have 2 newsletters. The first one is called Flow, and we send it to our members twice a week. On Wednesday.
And they pay for it?
Yeah, they pay for it. Yeah. We have more or less 600 members, so we are very, very small. But the main reason for this is that nobody of us could quit their other jobs, so we can't do only slow news now, but we're planning to do that. And we have found that people are paying not only to receive content from us, but they want to be part of the community. They can interact with us, and they can construct with us the editorial plan. They can ask something. They can even send us articles. Once, one of our members sent us an article and asked not to be paid, but to have the possibility to give away a membership to a friend of him. Okay. So this is a very interesting model to connect with people who need this kind of journalism.
Mm-hmm. I'm not yet 100% convinced, honestly, because I mean, and the expression "slow news" comes from the slow food movement.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct because Peter invented it, so it's correct.
Peter, except from stealing people their mobile phones, what? Yes. Can you give me some more? Is this just a trend word? Is this just an excuse to find a new expression for something, for basically good journalism, or is it something more?
Well, sure. We're taking advantage, I think, all of us, of the word slow, which is ubiquitous now, looking to push back on cultural, societal stuff that just seems to be escalating in speed to the point of no return. But there is the legitimate reality of some kind of a compulsion that we all have. That was what the failed experiment was about. We just are always checking for more and wanting some kind of an input, all of us who are so-called practicing slow journalism or are believers in the concept. We have a very hard time getting off that merry-go-round too. So the idea is, I think, to be conscious of what is good journalism and what is so-called clickbait and what is just satisfying our desire to wonder if something else happened all the time. My wife Sheila, who's in the audience here, is always telling me that I'm preaching about this but not practicing it, because it is very difficult. In fact, you keep mentioning the book, thank you, but it's dedicated to her, and it says that it's with love to Sheila, who questioned my priorities whenever I drove our old Chevy pickup truck 17 miles across the Nevada desert just to buy the latest edition of the San Francisco Chronicle. Of course, that's before we had these things, but we still could be looking for something fast. And right here in this town, in medieval times, somebody went by with a bell, probably, the town crier, and said, "It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all is well," and that was an immediate fix.
But with all due respect, to this very romantic thing.
Yes.
But she could just read the San Francisco Chronicle on a tablet.
Not in those days.
Not in those days, but
Yes.
today.
Today, yes.
Which is fast news in a way.
There's nothing wrong with fast news. You came up with this example the other day. What if some crisis were occurring in my city in Oregon? Yes. So would I want to know right away? Sure. But what we are tending to do is know about the crisis in Milan and the crisis in Copenhagen and the crisis in Oregon. And I don't need to know about the crisis in Milan and Copenhagen right this minute. Maybe I should know about it after it settles a little bit, and journalists there have had a chance to make sense of it. That's, I think, where the problem is. We're getting this moment-by-moment news that isn't really news.
Can I add something?
You sure?
I think what we have, as journalists, we're just raised, or we're just used to using technology to pace, to scale the tempo, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we did with the what's it called? You know, when we I'm doing the.
No, the telegraph.
The telegraph, yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
When the telegraph came, then we could get news fast, and that
Yes.
was nice, because then we knew that the First World War was coming, right? But eventually we just and we did the same with the internet. We used it as a telegraph. Okay, now we can tell stories even faster without asking ourselves that when we are able to tell the story as it unfolds, does it make sense, right? And maybe I can add just I don't know if this is too intimate to share here, but I'm gonna try it anyway. Okay, then I can regret afterwards. But I was thinking about what technology does to our communication and our understanding of stuff this morning, because yesterday evening I was very sad. I went home from the party at the fastest hotel, right? Anyway, that's another story. I went home and I was very sad. I have 3 kids, and maybe I want a 4th one. But I think it's difficult because I'm a media startup person. I'm busy. So I was crying, I have to admit. And then I called my husband, and I was all a mess, you know, and I was rambling on. I'm thinking this, and no, maybe I'm thinking that, and I don't know, and back and forth and back and forth. And the conversation was just, you know, confusing. No one really of us really got what was the problem. And if I hadn't called him, I would have sit down maybe and written a letter, or maybe just thought it through, and then when I told him, that would have made sense, right? So when we're telling the story as it unfolds, it has a quality, it has a certain quality, but if we only do that, we miss getting to the meaning of it. Was that too intimate?
No,
yeah.
that's ideal. And,
yeah.
And Gunther, if I may, then I think that comes to the point where it's up to us as producers and up to all of us as consumers to decide when we aren't going to take advantage of that instantaneous communication, whether it's intimate with your husband or whether it's all of us because something's going on that we don't have all the information, and so we get fractured information, or we just don't need to know it right this minute.
Yeah.
We can find out later. We don't need it moment
There
by
is
moment.
a certain time for that, and there is a certain time, especially there is a certain place in the media market for the journalism that says, okay, let's just back off, get the facts right, connect the dots, find out what is the bigger thing going on here, right? Yeah, it's so important. I think that's where like understanding really begins.
But that means that Zetland, for example, it exists because we have so many clickbaiting sites, and because you have to thank all those fast news people, because then you offer them an alternative.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, that's yeah. I think Zetland wouldn't exist if there wasn't a need, if there wasn't a demand for something else. You know, I think more and more have this experience that they are sick and tired of this constant flow of news, but not really getting to the core. So sure. Yeah.
And too much news, because then you can't figure out what it is that you need or what it is that you want.
Yeah.
And as long as we're thinking the past pace for something like Zetland, we can also use the word we probably promised we wouldn't use, which is Trump, and we can thank Donald Trump for invigorating journalism in many respects and reminding us of the importance of it for democracy. And if we are going to take advantage of that knowledge, then we need to do it in a way that we can consume it at a pace where it's understandable.
And can I add something? There is another part of the slow news issue, and it's mainly involved with the business model and money. I've met young journalists in Italy who are paid 4 or 5 euros for an article, and which have to produce 10 or 20 articles for a day, dealing about the worldwide themes of humanity. So you have to write something about a diet, or something about Syria, or about a football match. And just because the main concern of that kind of publisher is we need to make traffic, and so because we run ads, and so we need to make money in that way. And this is the dark side. We never talk about that, even between us, because it's difficult to imagine someone paid 4 or 5 euros to write an article. But this is the point. If you can take those people and ask them, please write about issue that you know very well, and I can pay you well to make your work, your job, okay?
Sure. But there are a lot of magazines, digital or analog magazines out there who are doing that exactly.
Yeah.
Still don't get the idea why you need to call it slow news.
Maybe because something somewhere, I don't know exactly when and where, but something somewhere went wrong with journalism.
Okay, so can I interfere here?
Yeah.
Before there was journalism available on this thing here, was journalism slower?
No, definitely not.
So when was the time
we had bad journalism on paper and good journalism on these devices, and it's not the technology to make the difference. But I think that I have to find the word in English, okay? Because it's a bit difficult.
Dimmi in italiano.
Yeah, Gunther speaks Italian very well. No, I can try, okay? The point is that some journalists started to think that while they are informing, they are telling the truth. And this is crazy, because there isn't only one truth. It depends on a lot of variables. It depends on which is the windows through you see the reality. We can find a lot of examples in the history of humanity of this kind of misunderstanding. Let's imagine the first war in Iraq, for example. This was probably the first big journalism event totally embedded. We talk about that war as the first war who was broadcasted live, but CNN. It was false. And if you imagine that picture that probably everybody remember with all the cars in the desert, you can't see in that picture anybody, because someone have removed them before the shoot. And so somewhere, sometimes journalists started thinking we have the truth, and that's the problem. There is not a truth, so you can't have true news or fake news. You have to be as accurate as you can, but you can't pretend to be who is telling the truth to the others. I think this is the main problem.
Okay. And there's nothing wrong, Gunther, with a trademark. So slow news captures the idea. It doesn't mean that we are talking slowly, or that we aren't reporting something immediately that needs to be reported immediately, but it encapsulates the concept.
Okay.
Yeah, and it points to the fact that time and effort makes a difference, right? So of course, if you're a journalist today and you're at a news desk, there's a possibility that something happens, and then you're required to you're asked to write a story about that, which is to be printed or published in, say, 30 minutes or maybe even less. I mean, that idea is just crazy, right? That something happens, you hear about it, and then 15 minutes afterwards, you should say something meaningful, worth paying attention to.
Or sometimes immediately, which is really
which is
crazy.
maybe even more crazy, right?
Under most circumstances, it's all but impossible to gather and report simultaneously.
Yeah. So it points to the fact that time and effort makes a difference, right? And I really think today, attention is it's more worth than gold, right? It's the new currency, and if you are to take someone's attention, you really have to earn that right, I think. So I think it's a nice term in order to remind us that hey, make an effort, take your time, do the right stuff before you ask for someone's attention.
Yeah. There is, there is another issue. I have the sensation that it also involves the thing that we have to fill the places. So we have 72 pages on our newspaper, and we have to fill it with something. Yeah. And it doesn't matter with what kind of articles you put in that newspaper. Mm-hmm. Or let's think about the all news. You have to say something meaningful 24 hours a day, that it's simply impossible. Yeah. And I remember some analysis just 15 or 20 minutes after a fact. How can you make an analysis if you don't know actually what is happening? So let's enjoy the empty spaces.
Yeah.
And let's remember also that it's not just on the producer's side. The onus is on us as consumers to slow down and not want that constant barrage of something new.
Yeah. Although I think maybe I could play the devil here, Gunther, just to
please play the devil.
Get on your team. That I think there is a risk with the term that it could sound like you have to be a vegan and live a very slow life in order to enjoy slow news, right? And maybe even vote to the left of the side of there's a certain hippie-ish tone to it that I'm not
something esoteric.
Yeah, that I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing. That because at least at Zetland, for instance, we also. At one point, we decided to read to make audio versions of every story, because time is valuable, and the time to slow down and get on the couch and read a very long story for Zetland, that's just that's seldom. So we made the audio version so that people can listen to the stories on the go, and you could argue that sort of conflicts with the whole notion of slowing down, right?
But slowing down is not the message necessarily.
No.
So that's back at you
I disagree.
In terms of slow news as a concept. It is, as I said, a trademark, and it's to talk about what we've all been agreeing, I believe, and would hope most of you do too, that we don't need to be battered. We don't need to be battered, and we don't need to batter ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. It was just to play the devil.
Yeah.
But you, Peter, do you consume fast news?
Yes, perpetually. There's no question. In the morning in our little village, the New York Times lands on the driveway at 5 in the morning, along with the local newspaper, and I spread it out on the kitchen counter and turn on National Public Radio and have The Guardian up on a screen. But then that time is over, I hope. I try to enforce after an hour or so. and then give it a rest. And that's one of the things I think we all can do, is to pick some medium and get rid of it for a day or a week. We don't need all of it. We've shut the television off in our house, so there's no barrage of CNN, Fox News 24 hours a day yammering.
Is every article in a magazine, something like The New Yorker or The Atlantic, a slow news article?
No, of course it's not. And of course you can be slow, but you can be short, for example.
You don't need to be long.
No, you don't need to be long. You can even in some way deal with breaking news if you have made your homeworks before, if you have prepared your newsroom, if you know what kind of articles will be available in that moment to cover the breaking news. I don't think that we have to stop cover breaking news and to stop tell people what is happening now, but it's the attitude that we need to change. So probably you can find something that is it's not slow even in the New Yorker or in the Atlantic. I think that it deals about doing less and do it better.
Yeah.
Okay, we can.
I just wanted to add that I think that you're really right. It's not a genre. Slow news is not a genre. It's not you know, a 3,000 word piece. How much is that? That's long, right?
Yeah, that's long. Yes.
Yeah. So I constantly say this to our newsroom at Zetland. You know, just because you had a week to write your story doesn't mean that you are to deliver a novel, right?
Yeah, please go to the point. Okay.
And you can definitely tell. You don't have to use a lot of words to be slow.
As we discussed yesterday, the Mark Twain quote, which is probably Pascal, "Sorry for the long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one." It takes an effort to craft properly. And one of the other things, Gunther, in regard to what you said, is in the book I quote the work of a psychologist in Oregon who points out, according to her, that with this repetitive barrage, every time we hear again a bad news story, our fight or flight instincts kick in and we are traumatized again. So if we keep at it with all of these media punching in at us, whether it's airplanes crashing into the World Trade Center or a local murder, whatever it is that is traumatic for us, then every time we get it again, even though we're not getting any more information, but it's coming at us again because we subject ourselves to these other media sources, then we suffer again.
Yeah.
Was it? Can I ask you a question about Zetland? I mean, you say 2 or 3 articles, and what is the topics you're focusing on?
General interests, so it's politics, society, and culture.
And it's long digital articles, but long, let's say long form.
Longer, but not the New Yorker long, but longer, yeah.
And
too long sometimes.
And do your subscribers are they aware of have they heard the slow news approach of Zetland?
I think.
What is the feedback?
Yeah, I mean they know that. Actually, I think we use the term slow news in some marketing materials. So some of them definitely know the term, and with they know that when they sign up as members of Zetland, they are members of a media that's definitely not breaking news, and that's why they come to us, right? So they really want an alternative. They're sort of longing for a space where it's not the news headlines who takes their attention, and they appreciate that. We also have what we call Zetland Live. It's live journalism in a theater. So once in a while we meet up. It could be at the Royal Theatre. With over 1,000, an audience of over 1,000 people, and then we have journalism on stage. I always say, imagine it's TED Talk meets cabaret, kind of ish, right? And I don't think that's not a method for all journalism at all. But I think it points to it says something about there is a longing in people are longing for the analog experience, for the experience where you can sort of put your telephone down and just get a story and only focus on that story, focus on one story at a time, right? Yeah.
How many subscribers do you have now?
10,000 and something, 10,000 plus.
And how much do they pay for the slow news?
They pay
two articles, 3 articles a day, right?
They pay. I think it's 15 euros. You know, in Denmark we don't have euros because we're Danes and we don't like euros. But 15 euros a day.
What about this morning? We were comparing the price of Zetland with the price of New York Times. And it's almost the same.
Okay.
So there is someone who is ready to pay the same to read the 2 or 3 articles a day. And I have to be honest, I can't read Zetland because I don't understand Danish, but I am a subscriber of New York Times. And when I'm lucky, I read 1 or 2 articles a day when I have time. So probably this is a good way, and we are really encouraged by the number of their subscribers. It's wonderful, 10,000 in Denmark.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I think, New York Times definitely also do lots of fantastic slow news.
Of course.
But the other day I read in some marketing material that every day the New York Times publishes as many words as there is in the whole Harry Potter series, and that was sort of that was a marketing. It was something they said to try to get me on board, and I was like, the whole Harry Potter series every day? I don't have time for that. Please give me a chance to you are to tell me what's important. You have to do that, because I don't have time to go through a book series of 7 each day.
I would like, if there is, I see some, it's a hard time, it's in the afternoon, everybody came from lunch, I see some tired faces, slow news tired faces.
It's a break.
So, but I would like to involve the audience very soon. Just can you give me some details about how many subscribers you have so far, and how much do they pay for your newsletter?
Okay, for the first one, Flow, they pay very, very few. It costs €2 a month, but we are working on improving it, because it costs so few because it was basically content curation newsletter. But now we are making it different, and so we have to increase the subscription. And the other one, Wolf, is very vertical. It deals about journalism and technology and marketing and so on. So it's for a very focused public, and it costs €10 a month. And the 2 newsletter has at least 250 subscribers, and the Wolf and the 300 Flow. So mainly 550 subscribers.
Okay.
And it's very interesting the relationship with them. I'm really proud of that part of our slow news try in Italy.
Okay, and do the subscribers recognize the difference? I mean, for example, the newsletter from La Repubblica, I think is pretty nice.
Yeah, it is nice. But we have no agenda deeply involved with the breaking news. So we can choose what you have to read, and we can change. One of the 2 newsletters has the editorial plan public, and if you are a subscriber, you can help us to modify it.
Okay.
This is the main difference. We don't want to be the journalists who are telling you the truth. We want to work with you.
Is there any question in the audience? Yes, please, sir. Do we have a microphone? Or Peter, do you want to hand him over your microphone?
So I'm wondering if there's maybe a better expression for slow news. So when I look at Vox.com in the US, and they're working more or less like doing explainer videos or explaining complicated topics, I guess maybe that's the same, just another word, because I think like you have a problem with the term slow also.
I do have, yes.
Yeah, because it's maybe suggesting that then that it's not sharp, or that it's just like losing somehow the I don't know, that the focus, right?
Right.
So I think there's this big wave of explainer journalism in the US and in Europe, and even like daily formats. So it doesn't sound slow, but if you wrap up the day in like, let's say, the Daily from the New York Times podcast, I guess that could be slow news too.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I'll push back at you, because I think that we really have hit on something with, look at this, slow news, right? And we're talking about it based on it being, as I said earlier, a trademark. And I think it's important to hold on to something. There's not a negative with slow. Remember Aesop and the tortoise and the hare. And the term slow suggests, and that's why it comes from the slow food movement, that there's something percolating here, there's something developing, there's something of substance, there's something that you should be interested in, and slow is elastic. What exactly is slow? It's slow enough to be able, as you mentioned, Leah, to do a good job and have something substantive to present. So I don't think that that there's a derogatory or negative aspect to it. I think rather it really helps us understand what it is we're doing and what is we don't want. What we don't want is this endless barrage of noise that is imposed on us, and that is providing, to go back to food, empty news calories.
We know that the risk is to transform slow news in a cliche or in something like fashion, okay? We find slow everywhere. I've met a slow music association and a slow movie and slow fashion and so on, so we know that. But I think that we need in some way a trademark. We have to learn something from marketing. And we need a name to tell our story and our vision about journalism.
I think the explainer video thing is a good example. I mean, how long do you work for one good explainer video? Probably a week, 2 weeks. So, and this is a lasting explanation of phenomena. So I think that's a good example.
But it's just more than that, right? It's yeah. So I wouldn't equal that. It's not. It's maybe. I think the explainer journalism is definitely part of slow journalism, but that's more to it. For me, it's more like a wish. It's, hey, let's make a society where we're not all experts on only what happened the last 24 hours, but also what happened last week or the last century, or what society we want from the future. That it has that feeling to it. That's why I like it.
And under ideal circumstances, we would need no glib identifier. We would need no modifier. We would call it journalism. But at least for a while, we've lost that battle, and we need to do something to remove us, I believe, both as consumers and as producers, from the noise, from the garbage.
Can I add just one thing? Sorry. Mitchell Stevens from NYU, who's a professor at NYU, he wrote a fantastic book, and he calls it wisdom journalism. And I really like that term. Like, it's just, you know...
You should write a book, Peter, wisdom journalism.
No, he did that, so don't.
Oh, he did that, okay. Yes, sorry, please.
I think that there are two very separate concepts being discussed during this panel. One is about what is happening to us as consumers and the experience we have with news. And the other is what newsmakers are, how they're looking for a new path forward in this context. And I wanted to talk to you guys about the future, where you think this is going. because my mother told me, my mother was young in the 60s in Poland, and she started smoking then. And she still smokes like a chimney. And she keeps telling me, you know, dear, when we started smoking when I was young, we didn't know it was bad for you. Nobody told us that until later when we were already hooked. And I wonder, with that story in mind, what's going to happen to us when we look back on this time in 10, 20 years? Be like, Jesus, do you remember when our cell phones were jam-packed with breaking news 24/7? We didn't know back then what that was doing to our brains and to our attention span and to our lives. So what's it going to take for this situation
that's exactly
to change?
why, and maybe I did pick the right person after all. That's why I thought this would be a clever gimmick to take a phone away from somebody in the audience here for the panel, because we are so addicted. And one of the things I think all of us are doing, and I hope all of us in this room are doing, is trying to become conscious of that and figure out ways, whether it's to shut off the television, take one medium at a time, or somehow otherwise rationalize that input. But I'm sure you've seen the same thing. All of us have done it. You walk around this town this week, and it's this phenomenal place with amazing input of architecture and smells and show windows, and so many of us are walking around like this. So we have to do it. That's part of the argument of the book. We have to do it ourselves. We have to recognize it, just as your mother didn't early on, and we haven't early on, the negative aspects, and we have to figure out how to set limits.
But if we were to look at this analog situation with the cigarettes, I mean, now producers have to put a warning on the pack, right? This shit kills you. So is that what's going to happen to the breaking news industry? We're all going to have to click a disclaimer box. We know it's unhealthy to actually follow
Well,
breaking
that's
news.
kind of what's happening, isn't
Maybe.
it? With the Facebook stuff right now. It's kind of what's happening. We're not quite to the point of clicking, but you know, we really do click it, because before you start using Facebook or the others, you do click the acceptance of the rules and regulations of the company that none of us ever read.
I think there's there's a job to be done for Mark Zuckerberg and company, right? There is a job to be done for every one of us. I really agree that we have to pay attention to the fact that our attention is demand, right? So when we push something, when we click something, when we turn on something, that's the content that's going to win, right? And finally, I think that the media has a job to be done, and we have to make sort of an attention ethics to think about when is it okay for us to take someone's attention? Is notification only a good thing, for instance, or is it more a thing that's good for the company and the economy, right? And I would really this should be a panel next year, right? The attention ethics in the journalism business.
Yeah, but that's like nuclear disarmament, right?
Yes,
I
we'll
mean,
never
everybody
stop
has
wanting
to put their
you.
weapons away.
More than that, even though, because
All the
we'll
media
never
need
want
to
to
stop
stop
producing
wanting
the
you.
content.
Yes.
No, but it also has to do with the business model, right?
Yeah.
So if your business model is based on ads, then you want attention constantly. So let's rebuild the business model.
The problem for newsmakers is that you don't need to pay to have breaking news, because breaking news are a commodity. While cigarettes are increasing in their price, breaking news have no value, because you can find a title everywhere. You can find it on Facebook or on Twitter or on WhatsApp, and so.
But that's because you're the product.
Yeah.
You the one looking.
We are the product.
We are the one looking at the breaking news.
Even when you pay, you are the product. Because we know that newspapers and agencies sold our data every time.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to make prediction, because the risk is to say something like, okay, nobody wants a computer at home. No, so I don't want to make a prediction, but the fact is that breaking news are now a commodity. And so the only journalism that can survive, I think, I mean economically, is a kind of journalism who is valuable for people, a journalism that you want to pay for. Again, it's not paper first or mobile first or digital first, but it's people first, and not ads and big companies first.
We do have another question.
Yeah, hello, hi. I have kind of two-pronged question. First of all, I'm sort of trying in my mind to see how this is any different from just the Sunday papers, because they would have taken sort of everything that's happening in the week and contextualized and put it into a format that works. So they're just the old-fashioned Observer or Sunday New York Times. And then the second thing I have, which is sort of like, maybe if I had a week to think about how to phrase this question, it would come out better, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm worried that the business model around this news, and because you say this is contextualizing, this is giving people better information, this is making people more informed and better understanding, but you have to pay for it. So it is feeding into the information sort of gap and information inequality that exists in the world. So this is a Western world luxury, to be able to be that better informed. And within the Western world, it is people with means luxury. So we are creating basically a space for rich Westerners to be better informed, to understand better, and I want to argue perhaps also more liberal, who will seek out that kind of information. And I'm sort of thinking in this world of, you know, fake news, misinformation, disenfranchisement, you know, how do we square that circle?
How do we square that circle? We square that circle with creativity as we accept your criticisms, all of us accept it, and try to figure out how we struggle through this period of disruption and come out not just with new resources, but with resources that are not exclusive. And your point is very well taken. But it's a problem that is maybe beyond the scope of this panel in terms of figuring out the socioeconomic imbalances that exist, not just east and west and not just north and south, but right here in this town. How many times have somebody come up to you with a cup since you've been in town, and how many times did you put coins into the cup? So I think it's important for you to remind us of this. I'm not sure it's our job this hour.
I think yeah, please, it's geographically.
It doesn't depend on the price, though. I mean, media in Western society have always cost something, except for the public funded, right? So I think there is a model there, but I agree with you that there is a risk if the price is so high that it leaves out only those who or a lot of people. Yeah, I agree.
Yes, please.
Oh, there it is. I would like to try to answer your question because what
that's great.
So, and my point is that when we talk about slow food, it as what you said, it's a reaction to something. The women of Perugia cooking in the 17th century were doing slow food. They didn't think they were taking an empowering decision about their lives doing it. So whenever we talk about slow journalism, it's a reaction to something, which is the accelerated news cycle. And a few months ago, there was this research project came out of the Netherlands about how to cover plane crashes, how plane crashes are covered. And it showed that for the past many years, 70 years, the number of plane crashes has been going down. But the last 20 years, the coverage of plane crashes in newspapers in the Netherlands have gone up. So why does this make sense? It's because in the accelerated news cycle, you need to produce things very fast. So what's easy to write something that's newsy about? A plane crash, tragically as it is easy to write about. So, and we know what happens. Psychology tells us that makes people scared. They get a distorted view of what's dangerous in the world. They get numb from what we heard before, and they don't spend their time doing other things. So one of the answers to your question, I think, is also to think about what not to do, because not exposing people for that is an option, and that's free for everyone.
And that plays into what the psychologist said in Oregon about triggering the fight-flight emotion and adding stress unnecessarily with the repetition.
Yeah, and I think it's a taboo to talk about what the harm that news journalism does, because but luckily that doesn't have to do with income, or socio-demographics or anything. It's something we have to stop doing. But the good thing about what's the optimism is that we can actually feel it as consumers, unlike the climate change and those things. That's an abstraction, but we can actually feel, I think, what the accelerated news cycle and the technology companies and what they're doing to our attention. It feels wrong. You're looking at your phone, you didn't really know why, and I think that's a reason to be optimistic, because that means that we can maybe change stuff.
Yes. Another question from the audience. Yes, please, here in the front row on the other side. Thank you. Maybe we could then have some remarks, some final remarks by the distinguished panel guests, and then we could close this panel a few minutes earlier, make slow news, have a coffee before rushing to the next panel.
It's good work, Gunther.
That could be, yeah.
An instant coffee, yeah.
Okay, but please.
Yeah, I kind of want to follow up to that, because while you were talking, I was thinking, and I have a question not as a newsmaker, but as a consumer. And I've noticed in the past months that I'm not only overwhelmed by the pace and amount of news, but also I'm overwhelmed by bad news. I feel like 99% or maybe 100% of what I read is bad. So I wonder if but not making like exclusively feel-good stories, that's not what I mean. But in your selection process, do you think about, when you have 2 to 3 articles a day, so about 20 a week, do you try to not make 20 crisis articles a week?
Yeah. No, it's a good question, and I think these two phenomenons, the feeling that, when you turn on the television, it seems like the world is going to hell, right? That notion, that feeling taps into what we're talking about here, definitely, because it's just cheap journalism. And if the news cycle is accelerated, then that's the cheapest way to keep on top. Call a politician and make the politician say something bad about the other politicians. Bam, you have a story. Wow. Go on Twitter, see what Trump said. Bam, you have a story. Right?
Yeah, but the problem with that is it is cheap journalism. But when you're plagued, as we are in the United States right now, and we spread it to the rest of the world with Trump, unfortunately, there is a bad news story every day.
Sure, no, but you can, on the contrary, you can also argue that the media's bias for conflict has helped shape a phenomenon as Trump, because we looked in his direction when he said crazy stuff, because we like conflict, right? So after the Trump, the general election, there was this huge discussion about if journalism had a leftish bias, and I think that was definitely an important discussion. But another important discussion is the conflict bias. Do we tend to see conflict more than where there might not be a conflict?
Yeah,
right?
The problem is, though, that he's no longer just saying crazy stuff. He's doing crazy stuff.
I know. Yeah, but still, when he wasn't,
yes, you are absolutely correct.
When he was nobody, he still got so much attention because he created conflict.
No question.
So there is and at least for our part, we can't solve problem. We can't solve Trump. You have to deal with that.
We need your help. We need your help.
No, but we definitely think about this and write stories that's not driven by conflict. We do that, but we also look for other stories because the world is also made up of other stories than just conflict, right? We're not all dying from cancer. We're not all dying from a terror attack, luckily. But we do all live in the world of Trump. I agree. Yeah.
I completely agree. In one of my past life as a journalist, I was working for an Italian newspaper which likes very much bad news, and I thought, okay, my work as a journalist is to find always the bad news, and it's not true. For example, we are shooting a documentary on, and that's the reason why you can see the two cameras, because we are trying to propose something different. So maybe the work for journalists is also let's have a construct part. Let's try to build something and not only to point out what is going wrong, because okay, a lot of things are going wrong, but there are also a lot of things that are going well, and we have to tell them. And I don't want to write a book entitled Good News, okay, I promise, but there are a lot of good news too, and we have to talk about that.
That sounds like a good
summary, but one more. I have to give back your telephone and ask you how the hour went without it.
Well, now is the time to say that I'm a better person and I see the light. And you are Jesus and so, but let's take up something from the picture, and I don't want to think that you wanted to patronize me with this. No, let's withdraw this from the picture. And let's talk about side effects. The first one is that for 1/5 of my time, I was thinking about what to say now. So you didn't get my full attention, and this is because of you. No, except that I was a volunteer giving you the... The second is that transparency. I'm part of Slow News project of Alberto, but I am the black sheep. Because I think that, and I'm closing, I think that apart if you have an Amish approach and you want to close the electricity supply in Europe and let's be happy like in the golden era, I don't think this is the way. I think that we deserve a true answer to the fact that if you want to win against the addiction of velocity and of clickbaiting and everything, I think you have to find a sustainable solution in the velocity. You have to manage the noise and to find a way to have an effective filter. And so I think that your answer, our answer, is to be given in velocity with something really, Alberto called them contenuti anticorpi, antibodies. We have to project something to be fast and to deserve our slowness.
Think fast and think slow.
With my phone. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the sun. Thank you to the distinguished panel guests, and don't rush to the next panel, but go take it easy. Thank you.
Thank you.